Hey everyone, my name is Alex, and welcome to my latest hyperfixation. Today, I'll show you how I made a statue of my favorite bug electric types, Joltik and Galvantula. Oh, and it lights up. This project started with printing up some Pokemon. These models were made by this artist on colts3d.com. Their page is linked down below. My plan for this statue was to have Galvantula sitting on an electro web. So I added an armature to the model so I can move the legs and the body so I could have a sitting position on the electro web. While these are printing on my Anycubic Photon S, let's get started on the lights. I'm using these micro SMD LEDs in both yellow and blue. I'm soldering them up to a small coin cell battery pack. This should be enough power to run the circuits. Now for the base, I'm using a wooden disc that I got from the craft store. I'm attaching the battery pack to the bottom of the base by dremeling out a small little hole for the pack to sit in. I then fed the wires through and secured the pack in place with hot glue. Once that was done, I got started on building up the base. I started by cutting out some styrofoam. Always use a sharp knife. Please. Save yourself.
One eternity later.
Once that was done, I fed the wires through the foam and globbed on a bunch of hot glue to get it secured to the base. I then started adding some scrap foam to build up the walls of the cave, cutting some of it down with my hot knife to get some nice chunky pieces. Then it was time to carve down this mess of foam that I glued together. My plan for this statue was to recreate Chargestone Cave from Generation 5, with all the arcing electricity across the ground and blue floating stones. Remember that electro web from earlier? Well, I printed it out of clear resin. I wanted the web to be strung up between a bunch of rocks, so I'm carving out the sections where the electro web will go. Now with the web in place, I can start adding the lights. I hot glued the lights in place to eliminate the transparent web. I also glued in those blue LEDs to act as loading stones. I hot glued down all the wires so I can start adding the terrain paste. I've seen a bunch of crafters use different materials for terrain paste, but I like to use Perfect Plaster, Mod Podge, black acrylic paint, and a little bit of water. This makes it nice and goopy so I can brush it onto the base. And this is where things got bad. I should have added the electro web in place before the plaster. Once the plaster dried, I could no longer get the electro web into its spot, so I had to start over. But there's a silver lining. I took this opportunity to switch out the LEDs for some much brighter ones. And look at that shine. Oh, I also brushed on some clear UV resin that was dyed yellow to the web. And once I got all the LEDs working, I started to glue it onto the new base that I made. I didn't end up filming the making process of the new base, just because I'm not going to make you watch that twice, but I ended up starting completely over and made it on a much larger wooden base, with much more of a plan going into the design of the rocks. Last thing to do is glue down all the wires nice and flat, and I'll start putting on the terrain paste. Oh yeah, I added a 5-volt battery pack to power these LEDs. It's just tucked away in the back. Alright, since we've been through this once before, let's go through it again. We're going to use plaster, Mod Podge, a little bit more Mod Podge, black acrylic paint, and you'll mix it all up to get your terrain paste. I'm going to start globbing this on, but being super careful not to hit any of the LEDs. Once all the plaster's dry, it's time for some paint. But let's go ahead and check on those prints first. Looks like the prints are done. Let's go ahead and remove the supports and get them ready for paint. Unfortunately, I broke the leg off of my Galvantula, but through the power of editing, I fixed it. Now, if you didn't know, hand painting yellow acrylic paint sucks. So I'm switching to plan B. I'm lining up all the little Joltik in my Galvantula onto some tape and taking it outside to spray it up with some yellow primer. After that, I started to hand paint on all the details, and this took a few coats just because the yellow primer I used was a gloss, but it was the only yellow paint I could find that was accurate to Galvantula's colors. But that's fine, we make it work. I'm very carefully dabbing on a little blue for the Joltik's eyes and little feet, and added on some small details for the eyes. Then repeat that by like 26, give or take. Now for the charge stones. These were modeled up in Blender, made from some simple geometry that I decimated down to get those nice sharp edges. They then got some holes, and they were hollowed out for the LEDs to fit in, and then printed on my Creality Ender 3 out of a transparent blue filament. These pieces then got sprayed with a thick clear gloss to fill in the layer lines. Then it was time to start hot gluing them in place, making sure each LED is pointed upwards into the rock to get some good diffusion. And the charge stones light up perfectly. Now it's time to fill in some of the gaps. Mixing up a little bit more of that terrain paste, just globbing it on around the charge stones, being as careful as I can, but eventually getting some of the terrain paste inside the prints, but it's whatever. I'm also just globbing on a good amount so I can stick in some of these small rocks. Once it was dry, I went ahead and gave it a black base coat. Now, before I start painting, I'm gonna go ahead and mask off the places where I don't want paint to get. So the charge stones, web, the LEDs, you get it. I'm gonna start by dry brushing on a few coats of grays and blues to give it a nice undertone that I can wash on top of. For the wash, I'm mixing up some dark blue and black acrylic paint along with some water and just brushing it all over the base. I then dabbed away most of the wash from the base, leaving most of the wash in the recesses to darken as it dries. I'm also painting on some dark blue around the charge stones to make them look like they're glowing. Then I satisfyingly peeled off all the masking. Once all the masking was taken off the charged stones, I went ahead and mixed up some acrylic paint and some clear UV resin. I then brushed this onto the charged stones, curing it with my UV light. This will fill in any more of those layer lines and giving it a nice, even color and shiny surface. I still wanted that arcing electricity to come off the stones, and even those yellow LEDs built into the rocks are made for this. So I printed up these little lightning bolts on my resin printer, painted them with the same dark blue UV resin, and cured them with my UV flashlight. I ended up making a variety of these shapes, and I also painted on a clear UV resin dyed yellow, same as the web, for some yellow electricity. These then got stuck onto the base with some clear UV resin, gluing them right over those yellow LEDs I mentioned. I think this makes the diorama look so much more alive with this bolting electricity coming out of the rocks. The blue lightning bolts got attached the same way, with some clear UV resin, but this time to the charged stones. Now, I definitely could have printed these pieces in the respective color that I wanted them to be, but I don't want to waste a bunch of money on a bunch of different colored clear resins since they're a little expensive. And these still light up, even with the charged stone acting as more of a diffusion for the LEDs between the bolt. Now, before we add the Pokemon, let's go ahead and paint up our shiny Joltik with some clear UV resin and some glitter. All the other Pokemon got a clear coat after their paint job, and they are all ready to be glued on. Last thing to do is to glue the Galvantula onto the electroweb. Then I think it's time for some glamour shots. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. If you're not already, please consider subscribing. I'd love to keep making these videos, and subscribing shows me that you'd like to keep seeing them. Also, leave a like and share this video to help others find my channel. I loved reading your comments on my last videos. Let me know what other Pokemon statues you'd like to see me make. Also, let me know if you can spot the shiny Joltik and where I put it. Last thing, if you'd like to help support me, these projects, and my videos, please check out my Etsy. I make Pokemon-themed planters, and all sales help support future projects and products. My shop is linked down below. Until next time.